We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and welcome to the final Q&A episode of 2018. Got to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and not to worry, I have recorded an episode in the can with Lee Overstreet. It's not a question and answer episode, but that'll be posting next week on Christmas week when we are not
have to
recording.
know how long that episode is.
It is an hour and 45 minutes long.
How? Does it take an hour and 45 minutes to say, buy a recorder thing that has a VHS on one side and a DVD on the other side? How?
It's much more involved than that. This is Lee. He's been pouring his resources and heart and soul into converting his treasured things that he recorded on tape. This is various kinds of analog videotape and now trying to preserve it in the utmost quality in a digital version, which is a lot more involved than just using some kind of dubbing machine. So so we talk about that for an hour and 45 minutes, and that'll be a full show posting next week, and then it'll be 2019 all of a sudden. Look at that. So there you go.
I mean, how good a quality was it? Reel to reel? Is that he's talking about?
I mean, a lot of it was VHS. A lot
VHS
of it was
sucks anyway. So what?
High 8 camcorder stuff or 8mm camcorder.
Right.
Yeah,
but
super VHS. Some of it. There you go. We go into the whole thing.
You know what I'm angry about,
yes,
more than how it could possibly take you that long to talk about that, is that now that Lee has got these things,
yes,
or I will have to start seeing them on my Facebook feed, which I do not want to see.
Well, yeah, he's put it all on his YouTube, so you can go over to his YouTube.
He's going to be sharing it. Don't worry.
The Lee Overstreet on YouTube.
Why does he need a the?
Because somebody else was already a Lee Overstreet, and he forgot
that guy's not the.
He forgot his own pun, so he didn't go Lee Overtube. He went the Lee Overstreet. Anyway, that's him on YouTube. You can see all this stuff. And there's a whole reason why you're like, hey, these were from VHS. Why are they in 1080p 60? And that's exactly what we explain. So there you go.
Okay.
That's a tease.
All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions, except for next week where you guys are out of luck.
That's right.
Don't ask any questions this week because you're not getting in.
There's already a whole bunch that came in on Monday, so you guys are going to be waiting a while. I'll try to email people back if anything's time sensitive.
So if you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant, where we will not be answering your questions. You can contact us directly at rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant. At avrant_Tom, whatever.
Correct.
I don't care. No, just.
And if you're seeing the completed YouTube video, it's below Tom's name. The green screen. I can't get over there. It's over there. There.
Whatever.
There.
All right. We want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to patreon.com and signing up to support us monthly. Patreon will take a monthly donation of a minimum of $1, a maximum of infinity dollars, to give to us. The majority of that comes to us each month, and you can sign up for as long as you like. So we want to thank our 78, it was 79 yesterday.
Oh, it just ticked up to 79. That's right. See, I cut this off on Sunday night, so it was 78 on Sunday night. It just ticked up yesterday. 79 patrons now at patreon.com/avrantpodcast.
And while we will not list you all, if you want to be listed, let us know that you're a patron, and we will mention you. So we will mention Damon, Justin, and Richard as 3 of our 79 patrons.
That's right. It's Damien C, Justin B, and Richard P, who all signed up to support us on Patreon, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
If you can't support the podcast financially, you can always support us in some other way. Just let us know so that we can recognize you on the podcast. Greg talked us up to AV Science when he bought his JVC RS540 projector from them. Dave highly recommended the Swiss-made Kuhn Recon garlic press, whatever the heck that is, for me for my Christmas present,
yes,
which I immediately forwarded to my wife.
Oh, good,
so
good.
This is the one that apparently you're supposed to buy. And James sent Rob an Amazon gift card as a Christmas present. If you're like, well, why just James? Why just Rob? James has already sent me a bunch of stuff. like promotional stuff for my business. So I expect nothing more from James than what he's already done. And James has already been a great supporter of the podcast. So
he definitely has.
I thank you, James, for giving Rob a little something, and Dave and Greg for talking us up. Well, Dave for the recommendation, and Greg for the talking us up to AV Science.
That's right. Greg, Dave, James, thank you all so much for the support. Greg mentioning us to AV Science, that's a few people now. I bet we're getting known over there. That's more than one.
That'd be nice.
That'd be cool.
Nice. I know Accessories for Less knows who we are.
Definitely,
for sure.
Absolutely.
And so does
SVS.
SVS. And I'm sure that there's probably a couple other ones, but some of these companies are so big that it just kind of gets lost in all of that. But that's okay. IMAX. This is in the news. IMAX is abandoning its VR experience plans. 4 of its 7 VR experience locations are already closed, and the remaining 3 will close early next year. According to IMAX CEO, audience reaction to the 10-minute, $10 experiences were positive. $10 sounds actually pretty good to me, because I think the Void one wasn't much longer than 10 minutes that I went to, and it was a hell of a lot more than $10 per person. But anyways, $10 experiences were positive, but the financials just didn't justify continuing their original VR plans, which I can understand. Like I said, I mean, the amount of technology and people it takes to run these things.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they were mostly using HTC Vive headsets, so you can get those at home. And they were using like a force feedback vest to give you some tactile sensation and that. So it was a little bit more than what most people would probably have at home. But yeah, so they're like, yeah, the people who did it enjoyed it, but it wasn't making money, and it's taking up however much space that can be used to probably make more money than the VR experience was making. But they had sought out like $50 million worth of investment funds, and they were like going to expand it to 25 locations and stuff. Got up to 7, and then they're like, yeah, we're packing this in. So that didn't last.
The latest NVIDIA Shield update has added support for 5.1 audio from YouTube, making the Shield the first set-top box to support this feature. So now, if you want to have all the things, you need to have an LG TV, right? An Apple 4K.
Yeah, see, if you had an Apple TV 4K, you don't really need an LG OLED, because you can...
Oh, because they fix the thing
They do
with
Atmos
Netflix?
and Dolby Vision through the Apple TV 4K, so that's one way. Yep.
But it used to be that the LG was the only way you could get
It
Netflix.
was to get both from Netflix, yeah. But yeah, Apple TV 4K is your best choice for Netflix and for iTunes, of course, if you have iTunes content. NVIDIA Shield is your best choice for Plex and now for YouTube, which, like, hey, 5.1 audio at the very end of 2018. We did it, guys. We did it. We got there.
we finally got there.
I know it's brand new technology.
YouTube.
It's real tough, but we got there. And then, if you want the best from Amazon, you got to get an Amazon Fire. Actually, the newest Fire Stick is the best one, because that does all the video formats, including Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus. So you got to get a bunch of different boxes, which I'm sure is that's
enjoy the non-synchronized lips and voices on Amazon Prime.
You know, if the Amazon Fire TV Stick with all the bells and whistles doesn't do that, then that's nobody else can be expected to.
All right, we got some comments here from listeners. Austen, our previous former producer, was managing an AMC movie theater that closed down back in May. He snagged some QSC USA 850 amplifiers that were being liquidated. So he has 5 of them available for sale with a negotiable price. I guess probably, whatever. I don't know. The 850 is a stereo amplifier, 240 watts per channel into 8 ohms, standard speaker wire binding post, binding post outputs, 1/4-inch inputs that can accept both balanced and unbalanced signals, dual speed cooling fans. These are pro amps. They're not expected to be in the room with you. So if you are buying these and think you're going to put them at the front of your room, they are probably going to make noise. So just be aware of that. But if you're interested and would like to make Austen offer, you can email him at question@avrant.com, or you can ping him on Twitter at Austen, AUSTEN, Pond, if you'd like to inquire about that. So yes, Austen, we'd be happy to help you sell your amps. Yeah,
he's got 5 of them. They are stereo amps. They can be bridged. It is possible to bridge them if you want to get some crazy high-powered mono out of these things. Right. And unlike a lot of professional amplifiers, these ones can just use an unbalanced connection. So if you want to take your AV receiver that has pre-outs, That'll have RCA jacks. This one does have TRS jacks, the 1/4 inch, like the large headphone style jack, but it can take an unbalanced or a balanced in that connection. So just a regular RCA to 1/4 inch jack would work with these. So you don't have to do anything super fancy converting anything like that. Just the cable will do you. So that's pretty good. 240 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 425 watts into 4 ohms, which is how they get the 850 number multiplied by 2.
Karl had a laugh at our Oppo comments last week. I don't remember.
That was when they said, like, oh, we're going to support HDR10 plus, and we're like, but you don't make things anymore.
Yeah, all right. He wanted to point out though that the used Oppo 203 players are selling for well over $1,000 on eBay, and new units can't be found for less than $1,500. So if somebody out there still wants them,
yeah, some of them are like $2,800 for a new in-box 203, not the 205, which was more expensive full retail, but the 203, which sold for $550. I know that there's a really valid financial reason why they are no longer making these units, but I mean, you've already done the work at this point. It's just do another production run. I mean, clearly they could sell them.
Yeah. Oh my. I mean, if they did a production run right now, and then sold them at the original
why
price,
don't they do it like on Kickstarter? Get the money up front. It would totally work.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would probably get one. All right, let's get to the questions. John is waiting on his projector upgrades. So for the time being, he's still using his Epson 1080 UB connected to his Marantz SR6010 receiver, and the source is an Oppo 103 Blu-ray player. Yeah, you want that 203? Let's get $1,000, buddy. Excuse me. Every time he turns on his setup, he gets a pop-up message that says, audio return channel 1 is not available. He can cancel that message with a couple of button presses on his remote and then continue as normal. Everything seems to function just fine, but it's annoying to have to cancel that message every single time. He's pretty sure his Epson doesn't even have audio return channel since it doesn't do audio of any kind. He certainly doesn't need ARC, so any ideas how to stop this annoyance? Is this CEC being turned on someplace?
Yeah, I mean,
that's the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, so on the Marantz SR6010, they actually have the HDMI control, the HDMI CEC, separate from the audio return channel.
So maybe the ARC is just turned on.
Yeah, so that might just be turned on. So I would, for sure, the number one thing I would do is go into your Marantz's setup, just press the setup button on the remote, go into your, I think it's under the video section, because that's where all the HDMI stuff is.
Right, sure.
Go in there and make sure that both CEC and audio return channel, which are two separate things, are both turned off. Because, yeah, I mean, apparently it's looking for... I don't know why it's even looking for an audio return channel signal, why that isn't a push instead of a pull, but whatever. Clearly, it's not getting it from the Epson. That makes sense, because you're right. The Epson has no audio on it whatsoever. So, yeah, audio return channel 1 not available because this display device doesn't do audio of any kind. That would kind of make sense. But I would assume that, yeah, it must be what's inside of the Marantz. The only other thing I could question is if he's set things up, because the 103, I believe, also had an HDMI input type of thing. Where you could use the 103. That was my
other thought too. Yeah, was that maybe something in the one, because Oppos are so honestly overbuilt,
right?
Which is why everybody loves them,
with features that not everyone uses. Yep.
Right. That could be the case.
Yeah, because I was thinking he might have done the thing where he's actually sent the output of his Marantz into the Oppo, so that the Oppo is being used as a video processor, and then out from the Oppo to the Epson. And maybe, again, there is a setting in the Oppo as well for HDMI CEC, including audio return channel. So we're basically just saying make sure all of that is turned off in both the Marantz and the Oppo. It's easy to miss in the Marantz because it is separate from HDMI control, where it usually isn't in most other devices. So that it would be as simple as that. There's nothing to be done inside your Epson, so it's going to be one of those two things or both.
All right. Greg asked us a few months ago about when we thought the Epson 5040 UB might drop in price below $2,000, but then the Christmas miracle happened. We talked about what a great deal the JVC RS540, which is the same thing as the X790, has become, and how it can do full 4K HDR signal at 60 frames per second, while the Epson 5040 is still limited to 24 frames per second with HDR. He mentioned all of this to his wife while they're discussing updates to their home theater. Did her eyes glaze over? Because that's what my wife does. I remember when I was talking to her about subwoofers back before I got my first setup, and she just get this look on her face like, I am willing you to stop talking. I would like you to say different words than the words you're saying right now.
Will this end quicker?
I know. It's like that terrible part of 300. This will not be over quickly. You will not enjoy it. He mentioned all this to his wife. We were discussing about. She said how she's noticed that their flat panel, a 4K TCL, looks better than their local movie theater, and if the JVC could outperform a movie theater, then go for it.
He talked her into it. I think
I could see
he
that.
Talked so long, she's like, yeah, just go for it. If it'll stop you talking about, we're joking, of course, but you never know. We might
wear him down, man. I'm telling you,
to the truth.
It's probably the truth.
She's like, all it'll cost me to get you to stop talking about this is an extra $2,000. Just do it. Just do it. It'll be mercifully over.
That's right. All we got is just. It's like that the water torch where they drip the water on your head. You know, eventually you just I can't take it anymore. That's right. Get the projector.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
So far we've talked about torture and alluded to a rape scene in the movie.
Oh, geez.
So nailing it this week.
End of 2018.
That was not the proper choice of words either. All right, he did. All right, she said go for it, and he said he did. And since he was upgrading from the Austen 1040, a $500 projector from 2015, they are completely blown away by the quality.
Woohoo!
So it's nearly double his original budget, but they're very happy with the results. So it's $4,000. This thing is $4,000?
Well, we know he went to AV Science, so we know they're selling him for $3,800. So
yeah, okay.
He's like $2,000 to start, $3,800. That's nearly double. Yep.
But he did want to ask, we've recommended using the long zoom range and ample lens shift to allow for a rear shelf placement of the projector. He would have liked that, but this is the most expensive toy he's ever bought, so he's followed the manual's instructions to the letter, and the manual says to leave 200 millimeters, about 8 inches of space behind the projector and at least 6 inches above, and a foot to either side, with the front being completely open for the lens and the exhaust vents naturally. Why would you need 8 inches behind this thing?
Well, so the intake vents, which are not active, they're not active fans back there, but they're just the intake vents. They are on the back and the bottom. So they're saying leave some space behind it because the intake vents are back there.
So he went with, and this episode is obviously sponsored by Nestle, who ever since learning that if you throw an M&M on a cup, people will use it or buy it. In my case, it was the largest clean coffee mug.
There you go.
The thing. And they are in no way sponsoring this. So he went with a ceiling mount, and there are no problems. But was he being overly cautious, or should we, Tom and Rob, be more conservative and avoid recommending rear shelf, or especially some sort of built-in placement like within a soffit or shelving unit of some kind? I mean, you don't not have a point. We should always at least look at the recommendations. I don't think I have 8 inches behind my projector up there, but I don't think I have much less than 8 inches. I mean, it's close because I got like a standard size board was like 24, like just a piece of plywood.
Right.
It was like 24 square, 2 feet on each side. And I mounted that back there flush. And so the projectors, the front of the projector is basically hanging off, and then the back of the projector is however much space there is to the wall, which is probably close to 8 inches. Yeah, I mean, whenever we say soffit, too, a lot of times we're talking about not shoving it inside of a enclosed structure, but more likely something that's essentially open, but it's got grill cloth covering it, so that it you put insulation in there and stuff like that. But you're right. I mean, you should always look at the recommendations of the projector or whatever gear that you've got. Same thing with the receivers. A lot of people think, oh well, I can just throw this receiver into any old box and they'll be fine. That's not always the case. Yeah. But that being said, I'm sure my receiver has some sort of recommendation for how much space on top of it. It's got about 1 inch. Yeah. But it's open on every single side, and it's not enclosed inside of anything whatsoever. So I'm not worried about it. So you gotta kind of have to evaluate each placement or each installation on its own.
Yeah, in the actual safety things, so there's always a section in there on placement of the projector, right? And that's where it says these things. But they also at the beginning have that whole list of safety things. The number one of which is read all the safety precautions, which nobody ever does. Right, sure. But in that whole section at the beginning, they actually mention they're like, you can put this in a shelving unit in a bookcase or something, but if you do, ensure that you have some kind of active way of circulating the air. Sure. Fans, or have an air conditioning thing built in there. And I will fully admit we're not always the best of saying when you're doing particularly like a hush box installation or using a shelving unit or something like that to hold a projector or an AV receiver. In our heads, we're almost taking it for granted that we know the air needs to circulate, and if there's a chance it's not going to, we're going to put in fans, just some PC fans, some big 120 millimeter silent PC fans to make sure that the air moves around. We almost sort of take that for granted, but we shouldn't. We absolutely shouldn't, because not everybody just knows that inherently. But
that's true. But this is also a 2-hour podcast.
That's right.
We can't go through every safety precaution of everything.
That's right.
We're like, if we tell you to install something someplace or put it on the shelf in the back, I mean, first of all, again, I would not worry about an open shelf mounted to a back wall.
Right.
Even if you only have 4 inches behind there.
Exactly.
Because you've got space on every other side.
And the air can get to it. I mean, what I was getting at is in the manual, what they're saying is, if this is just on its own, this is how much space we want. But if you are moving the air so that cool air can get to those intake vents, it's okay to have a little bit less space. But the important thing is that those air intake vents are able to get us constant supply of cool, fresh air. Right. So that's the important part. There you go. They said it, and I will completely agree with it.
All right, Nick. Nick wrote this a little while ago asking for not too expensive sealed headphone recommendations, and our immediate top picks were the Sony MDR7506 and the Audio-Technica ATH-M50Xs. I guess there's now a Bluetooth version of that too.
That's right.
So now he's decided he's willing to spend as much as $500. But before we go suggesting planar magnetics, these aren't for critical listening. He teaches at a college and sometimes ends up at his desk pretty much the entire day. He likes to listen to music at a low volume with clear, non-fatiguing sound. He also wants isolation from outside noises. Then he'd also like to be able to use these headphones when he's outside or at home cooking dinner, so all day wearing comfort. Sealed noise isolation, portable and desktop use, and clear sound at low volumes are his top priorities. He went through Inner Fidelity's Wall of Fame and got up in price to the Shure SRH1540 before finding a recommended pair of headphones that don't seem to have any described sound quality compromises, at least at low volume levels. Several reviews laud their comfort and neutral sound, and they're on sale for $400 right now, so should he snap those up? Sure, I don't care.
So
I mean, you kind of, to me, you've decided that you want those, which is great. Now, and honestly, I don't care. You're spending $500 on a pair of headphones. I'm not worried about sound quality compromises as long as I'm not buying them from Bose or Dr. Dre. All right? If I'm buying from almost anybody else, I'm figuring they put enough technology in there so that it is a decent sounding pair of headphones. I would be less... planar magnetics are perfectly fine at low volumes. I don't see why that would be... But
almost all of them are open back. There's very few of them that are a closed back.
And here I am with closed back ones on, but they don't make these
anymore.
Thank you,
Oppo. Anymore.
Thank you, Oppo.
Yeah. And
these are
wearing comfort all day long?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that either.
Yeah.
I have small ears, so these are not bad for me, but I certainly wouldn't be wearing them all day long. Yeah, I mean, are these? I didn't click on this. So what are the Shure? So they're open. I mean, they are a closed back.
I mean, they absolutely check all the boxes that he was talking about. I have heard them. I don't own them, but I've heard them over at the headphone bar. And I mean, it's Shure. I'm pretty much a Shure fan. They don't make pretty much anything where I'd be like, oh, that's a bad choice. So if these check all the boxes and you're willing to spend $400 on them, I'm certainly not giving them a thumbs down. The only thing I would mention is there is a pair of headphones that also check all the boxes, which have been discontinued because the new model is coming out to get them, so they're even less expensive, and those would be Sennheiser's HD598 Cs. That's the closed version of them, because the regular 598, which has now been replaced by the 599, that's an open back design, but then they have the CS variant, which is a closed back. I haven't actually seen the 599 closed back come out onto the market yet, but it's on its way. They released the 569 closed back, so I'm assuming the 599 closed back is coming, but the 598s with the closed back, they're down to $130 on Amazon right now.
Wow.
And I mean, when they came out, they were $300. So, we're not talking like they had some huge variance in price. I wouldn't expect a huge variance in sound quality. And as far as comfort goes, I have some of those HD 500 series. I have couple of pairs of those design, and they are super comfortable. So those would also check all the boxes, and they're just less expensive, so I can easily recommend them.
Right, but he's looking at a headphone that was $499 discounted to $399, and
Right.
you're talking about a headphone that was $300
discounted to $130 now, yeah.
$130. So there may be some cognitive distance going on there as far as the price differences, even from the starting.
But
prices.
honestly, I mean, they're both available at Amazon. So would you be willing to buy them both and send back the one that you keep the one you prefer?
That's probably the best idea, because because what's going to probably happen if it were me. I'll tell you what would happen. I would buy the cheap one and always wonder whether or not I should have bought the expensive one. So I would buy them both with the idea that I'm doing this so I can convince myself that these $130 ones are worth it.
Yeah.
And then I would send back the $400 ones.
Sure. And Amazon will survive the return.
That's
you
right.
don't have to feel guilty about that. One thing I want to mention, those HD598s, because I actually thought they were like all the other 500 series where they only come with a 10-foot cord and the 1/4-inch jack. It actually is a removable headphone cord, and they come with a 4-foot with a 3.5mm jack as well. They have both. They have the 10-foot 1/4-inch and the 4-foot 3.5-inch, and you can switch back and forth, so they're perfect for both desktop and portable use.
There you go. Dan has a 5.1 setup in his bedroom using small infinity speakers. One of the speakers is starting to cut out, and he'd like to upgrade both the sound and form factors of his speakers. Space is at a premium, and if his doors open, the front right speaker ends up behind it.
Yeah, you swing the door open, now your front right speaker is behind the door. Yeah.
So you don't come in the room when he's watching TV.
Yeah.
He's got a budget of around $500 to replace at least the front 3 speakers, although he'd like to replace all 5. The wall up front has a small fireplace in the middle, and the TV is wall mounted above the fireplace. There are pocket doors to either side of the TV and fireplace, and then a short bit of wall to the outsides of the 2 doors. He's got a chair in the front left corner, and the door swings open on the right side wall into the front right corner, so he's thinking in-wall speakers might make sense. But he can't do an in-wall center because his pocket doors use the wall space behind the TV and fireplace. Okay, so basically, the way to think about this is there is not like a traditional big hearth fireplace, like a small in-wall, it almost looks like a fireplace. I think it's electric?
Probably. Almost certainly,
looks like
because if those pocket doors close behind, it means there's no depth to that fireplace, so it's got to be electric.
Yeah, so it's sort of like wall-mounted fireplace thing. Above that is the TV, but the fireplace is quite low, so the TV is at a reasonable height. There's doors flanking that, and then wall on either side of that. And it looks like he's got his... I don't see his side channels. Are they really low?
They're super low. The front right speaker is like just a foot off the ground next to the door, and then the front left speaker is a foot off the ground behind a chair right now, and the chair has like bumped it so it's aiming at the floor, so he's clearly not using that right now. I can't see where his surround speakers are in here. I do see...
probably under the bed based on the other placements.
Either that, or I do see it's hard to see in the images, but there's like a cord running up the very corners of his back corners, so I bet they're way up high and we can't actually see them in the photo.
I see what you're talking about.
Because I don't know what else that cord would be going to.
So they'd be way up in the top right and left corners
I
of the
believe
room.
So. That's just a guess, but I think that because what's to the left and right of his bed, I think are lamps, not speakers. So, yeah,
those are definitely.
I think that's where but he was much less concerned about the surrounds because those are actually still working. So those aren't vital to be replaced right this moment. But the front 3 he wants to change.
So he asked, what would we recommend? He's got a mono-price a premium speaker package, the one that's basically the clone of the Energy Take Classics in his living room, and he's happy with its performance. So he's thinking mono-price in-wall speakers. Should he match those with a mono-price premium center or maybe an in-ceiling center? Well, first of all, we got to work on placement here, Haas.
Yeah, and I'm looking at, like, especially to the left, he's got, like, the wall switch over there on the left side. So I'm like, it's going to be tricky for in-walls. I also question how much, space is actually in those walls, because that's all doorway and corner and stuff, and you might have a significant amount of 2x4s that you don't actually have the bay space available in those little teeny tiny side walls, or, the walls to either side.
I would agree with that. I'm surprised he can actually wall mount that TV and not have those pocket doors be affected by it. I'm just surprised. Because those wall anchors tend to be pretty deep.
If they used lag bolts, but
right. Unless he somehow just got it perfectly on the studs
Yep.
somehow, that would be a miracle. But okay, so here we are. We're looking at this. I'll be honest, this is one of the very few times where you're going to hear me say this. This kind of screams like a Yamaha sound projector to me up
Oh,
front.
I see. Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
You could put it right underneath the TV. It would do your front 3 speakers just fine. And
yeah, I mean, you could also do like one of those speaker bars where it's, 3 regular passive speakers, but they're all built into one enclosure that looks like a bar that could be mounted directly below or above your TV. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, that to me that makes sense. If there's a way, because I haven't looked at the Yamaha speaker bars in forever, but if there's a way to do Atmos, then you could use those speakers, which are clearly on the ceiling to either side of you, as top middles.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then just use the sound bar as the rest of the speakers. That might be a solution. Could be. I mean, for the other thing that came to me that I was looking at here, it'd be a very similar speaker size, but probably up tick in quality would be the NHT SuperZeros.
Okay.
That would have the same form factor that you're looking for. I still would recommend that you do not place them a foot off the ground or however.
No, I don't know what happened with the front left rights originally, why they're so close to the ground. I have no idea. Along similar lines, I immediately thought of the Focal Bird series.
Sure.
Because instead of going in-wall, which I seriously question in-walls in here. I wonder whether the space exists. If you are going to do surrounds, I'm like, one of those is definitely an exterior wall. And I'm like, an in-wall speaker in your side exterior wall probably isn't going to work. Right. So I really
you have to get one of those super duper shallow speakers, which are it's gonna blow your budget anyway.
So I'm more in favor of staying with on wall in here now. Up front, and since they're a good deal right now, if you go Superbirds, because they're buy one get one free over at Accessories for Less right now. So the Superbirds sit nice and flat on your wall. Even with that wall plate, I guess it'd be very close to the corner over on that left side, or it would be a bit low if you put it below the wall plate for the light switch. But either way, there is still room for it as an on wall. That gives you a little bit of ability to aim just slightly, which an in wall doesn't give you any ability for that at all. And then as a center, it would be absolutely perfect, either in between your fireplace and TV or above your TV, a Superbird. You could also go with the Little Birds, or use Little Birds as your surrounds if you want everything to match. But yeah, so I think we're very much thinking along the same lines, whether you go NHTs or you go Focal, we're thinking on wall.
Definitely on wall.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, or stands, but I don't think he wants stands.
No,
it doesn't seem to be the case.
No.
And as far as like the NHTs, you're going to buy the same speaker for everything.
Right.
So
SuperZeros all around.
All around. Or with the Focal Superbirds or whatever little birds you want, the line all kind of matches. So you can use the front 3 as Superbirds and the back as little birds or something like that. And then I still think that you try to use the speakers that are way too high in the back, because remember, everything's supposed to be sort of kind of ear level, as much as possible.
We like the surrounds a little bit elevated, but if they are, and we're only speculating that they're way up in the top corners, but
they could be they could be inside that
else.
They could be in that bay that seems to be behind his bed.
We're not exactly sure, but we're guessing that they're way up high. So if they are, that's a little too high if they're way up in the corners.
Yeah. So I mean, say you're lying on your bed, basically where your lamps are is kind of where I would want, that's the height I would want my surround speakers. Now you could put them on the side walls.
Yes.
That's fine. But I would want the height to be about where your lamp is.
Yep.
If that makes sense. And the front speaker should be lower. It should be about ear height all the way around. Of course, you won't be able to do that with your center because of whatever, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Ian is in search of the best price on a 65-inch OLED. One of Ian's friends found some prices that seem too good to be true, like a $1,200 asking price on a 65-inch LG C8 from a place called ABC TVs. Should Ian's friend make the purchase from them? Are they an authorized retailer? Because if they're not, then no.
They are most definitely not. No. One of the things I always recommend when you find, because I mean, you'll find these are a dime a dozen, these sites that do this, and they almost always do have these prices that you're like, that seems ridiculously low. If it's like $100 lower than anywhere else you've seen, I may be like, maybe, but when it's $1,000 lower than anywhere else you've seen, One thing I always do, I just take the name of the place and I just type it in plus the word scam in Google, and guess what? It almost usually pops up with like 300 user reviews, 1 star. Right. This place is a scam. Better Business Bureau has been alerted.
Right. I mean, we've seen this over and over again, and one of the reasons why we recommend authorized retailers more than anything is just for the warranty.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, I mean, you order from this guy that's going to be a buyer beware sort of thing, and you're almost certainly going to end up with a unit that is damaged in some way. Maybe has a stuck pixel or 2 or 5.
Well,
or
even
10
more than that, what almost always happens with these places is you place the order online because they have an online shopping cart, and then you get a phone call, and the phone call will say, oh, we're out of stock, it's back ordered, but we have this very similar model that's only $300 more, and then the scam and the runaround really begins.
Right.
Or they'll tell you, oh, it's actually the European model, and if you want to get the North American one, it's something else. Or, oh, we have to charge shipping insurance, and it's $800 for some reason. Like, it never works out. And honestly, I did type in ABC TVs plus the word scam into Google, and I got like 350 results of 1-star things, and Better Business Bureau has been alerted. So don't buy from them. And none of these they're all the same thing. Yeah. They're all the same plan, and don't get suckered into that.
It's the internet version of the white van.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. Honestly, if you're looking for stick to the Amazon Marketplace or eBay, because at least you have protection from Amazon and eBay themselves in those instances.
Right. Christian asks, if you go to a store and pick up an LCD or an OLED TV in person, is it okay to lay it flat, like it's like on its back inside of a box in your car or truck while you drive it home? He remembers being warned never to lay plasma TV flat and always keep it upright while transporting it. But does the same apply to LCDs and OLEDs? What? Was that really a thing?
Oh yeah, I was warned as well. Yeah, with plasmas,
really?
They're like, never lie them flat. Always keep them upright.
I can't believe that.
I transported my plasma flat plenty of times. It was always fine.
I just cannot believe that. What would happen? Where's is it going to spill out?
No, I mean, it was because plasmas were a glass screen, not a plastic screen, and it's really easy. I mean, it very little flex. I mean, look at what happened to my poor Kuro, which I had professionally shipped, but at some point someone jostled it a little bit and it cracked. So, yeah. It was the glass.
I'll tell you what, I was just at Sam's, and they had like 1,000 OLEDs lying down in the middle of the store waiting for people to come buy them. So if this is an issue, someone should tell the manufacturers and the resellers, because they apparently don't know about it.
I almost question the like the higher end OLEDs from LG. They have what they call their picture on glass, which is the OLED itself and the thing covering the OLED screen itself. Those aren't glass, but it's like on top of a piece of that. The glass is the substrate. It's the physical structure holding it flat. And I almost question those more than anything, because OLEDs and LCDs, they're all plastic and they're flexible. And they have no problem. And I transported LCD and OLED TVs flat in my car. I'm not worried about it in the least. So it's not that. It with the plasmas, it was the glass screen, and they were really, some of them were exceedingly fragile. So that was about all it was. The panels themselves are totally fine.
I've never heard of that. So I learned something today. This is a different John. Yes. So this is our second John, and they both have the same last initial too, but you don't know what it is because I never read them because somebody complained about it, and therefore I never will. John says...
I'm the passive-aggressive one. Yes.
Who said that? I never said you were passive.
You have totally called me passive.
Never said that. Canadian. That's like that's what you people do, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. You guys are just like, oh, super nice.
Yeah, we try not to be harsh.
That's good. That's good. You're setting a good example for the rest of the English-speaking world.
Yeah, hopefully it stays that way. I'm so scared so scared about the way our politics are going in Canada. I'm freaked out.
Welcome.
I know.
Don't complain about your politics.
Everywhere else in the world. That was the thing. We were like, hey, it's not happening in Canada yet. Now it is. I'm freaked out, man. Freaked out.
I started watching Saturday Night Live sketches on YouTube. I started off with slightly cringeworthy these days because of how we've redefined and I guess better defined how we should and should not insult people when it comes to labeling them one way or another. But I was watching the old Will Ferrell skits with the Jeopardy.
Yes.
And Alex Trebek. Oh my God, I was literally crying. And then I started watching, because I haven't watched Saturday Night Live 10 years. I don't think I've seen an episode in 10 years. So I was I was getting all the Donald Trump parodies and all, some of the old stuff all the way back from the election and all of that. And I was just, wow. Wow. This politics thing is really not great. I'm so glad I'm not doing Now, that being said, if we did a politics podcast, we would have endless material. Like, we'd never run it out.
Seems that way.
It does seem that way, but
wasn't it great when politics used to be boring and people were like, I don't care, like, not because I want to tune out, but just because nothing interesting was going on. Don't we long for those days?
Yeah.
Yes.
They'll come around again. Don't worry.
May you live in interesting times.
Different John from the first John. John says he started listening to AVRant just recently and he loves our down-to-earth advice. So he'd like to ask, what is our opinion on Cerwin Vega's speakers in general? Crap! No, I mean...
You're in a mood.
No, the coffee's kicking in.
There
I'm getting jittery. He says they have the three-way tower XLS28 in particular. He thinks they're great party speakers that are still good enough to be used as front, left, right, and surround setup. Let me look at these things. I haven't looked at them.
Oh, they're big. I mean, they're the Cerwin Vegas that you would expect.
Right. Okay, so party speakers. I don't like that. Whenever we start, oh my God, look at these things. Jesus, Cerwin Vega, man, they're like, we're leaning all the way into this.
It's big and a lot of drivers for a small amount of money, so you can see exactly why they are popular.
Yes, and I mean, I reviewed, like, one of my very first speaker reviews was of a Cerwin Vega setup, and it was perfectly fine. I mean, it's serviceable. And so what you're saying, John, is. You're right. Okay, there I don't think party speakers makes much sense. Other than they can get really loud.
Well, they're often sort of sold in that vein. Like, the what is that? Didn't KRK have some speakers like that? Just like big driver horn thing.
Oh, I don't remember. Yeah, KRK's. Yeah.
I think
I do seem to remember that.
Yeah, like not in their desktop series, of course.
No,
they had something along those lines. Big old driver horn thingy. I mean, basically a PA speaker.
Right.
And am I wrong that Cerwin Vega, that's where they got their start, was largely PA type speakers?
That's in my mind. That's what they got started as DJ speakers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely not.
I mean, whenever somebody's saying, "Oh, should I buy these Cerwin Vegas or whatever? They cost this much," and blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, well, for that amount of money, I could probably find you something better.
I mean, especially when there's something like RBH Impression Series out there,
right?
And it's products like that moved the goalposts because I mean, so he's like, what is my general stance on Cerwin Vega? I'm like, they're fine. I have nothing against them. I don't consider them like really hi-fi. They usually have some high-end roll-off. Like a lot of their tweeters don't really have much response above about 8 to 10K.
Yeah.
They are often kind of bass heavy. I wouldn't describe them as having a completely neutral linear frequency response, but none of that is super important when it's like, I want something that can play loud for not a lot of money. And it's like, I think they're fine for that. But if I'm going for what would I want to listen to music critically on for a low price, it's like, well, now there is something like the RBH Impression series or the Ascend SE series, which are not drastically more expensive than these Cerwin Vegas. Do they play as loud with as few watts? No, they do not. So, they're different applications. These could be very useful.
And there's, like I said, a lot of times people get their start with a certain type of speaker and they end up preferring that sound because that's what they know, and there's nothing wrong with that. We can work with that. If you say, back when I was in college, I had some Cerwin Vega speakers, and we were my dorm was the most kicking dorm, and everybody loved it. And I always want to have speakers that are big and loud, and they just make me happy. I'm like, fine.
Maybe you graduate to a Klipsch or something, right? Totally
exactly what I would have said too. Yeah, you want to, now that you got some money, why don't you get some Klipsch and talk about loud? Let's get
loud with not very many watts. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. So
that's right.
that's fine. Let's go on. In his head, he's always thought it made sense for your speakers to play full range, at least your front, left, and right speakers, if not all 5 or 7. Not many speakers can actually play down to 20 hertz, and he's all for huge dual subwoofers. But shouldn't you still strive for full range front, left, right speakers in addition to those subs that are handling the LFE? We've talked about, he's clearly a new listener, and John, right. I don't want you to think that as in me in any way complaining. Or
we love to repeat because it helps people. It's important. We do have new listeners, and we've had lots of people tell us it was the 4th or 5th time I heard you say something, and it finally made that makes sense now because we described it a slightly different way. So
what you're describing is the thought process of about 10 years ago. About 10 years ago,
and also a ton of people still today. So you were not alone at all.
Yeah. So about 10 years ago, we really didn't understand how bass interacted with the room very well. We had no idea. So more and more sources of bass was just the best that we could come up with, and placing things around the room was a matter of convenience. And we did do the subwoofer crawl and that sort of thing, but we would still have our full range speakers, or try to have our speakers play as low as possible.
There's also the intuitive idea of, if the signal is full range for each and every speaker, doesn't it make sense to send the entire signal to one speaker, and if the speaker can play it, have that one speaker play the entire full range signal? Intuitively, that makes a lot of sense.
But just like with any science, as we pick apart the nuances of it, we find out new things. So one of the things we found out is that bass does not act the same way as you would expect it to, considering a more directional sound. Those higher end sounds are more directional, and you need those speakers to be placed in certain places because you can locate them with your ears. You can tell where that sound is coming from. Bass is not that way. We always knew low bass was omnidirectional, but we didn't really understand what that meant until Harman and did their research and found out that placing the subwoofers in specific locations gives you the best bass, and putting them in other locations will give you many more problems. Those places are not where your front, left, and right speakers are. So by having your front, left, and right speakers play the bass and not the subs, or in addition to the subs, you're actually creating bass problems in your room. Yes. The best place for bass to originate in a rectangular enclosed room is in the midpoints of opposing walls, first, in opposing corners, second, and then mirrored across a room from each other, third. Those are your 3 best locations for your subwoofer placement. That you may recognize, having a speaker in the center of your front wall and the center of your back wall is not where you want to have your front, left, and right speakers placed.
No.
So the place for bass is not the same. The best place for bass is not the same as the best place for your front, left, and right speaker.
Correct. Yeah.
So that is why we no longer, and again, this is new recommendations. I consider it very new recommendations compared to what we thought not 10 years ago or less, which is we thought you should put the subwoofers right next to your front, left, and right speakers because your front, left, and right speakers were the ones playing the sound. Therefore, your subwoofers should be right there.
Right.
No.
And a lot of our information that we used to go on, it came from the movie industry, where you've got big rooms, or it came from concert venues where you're basically in a stadium, or it came from anechoic chambers where you do not have reflections from the rest of the room. But none of those are your home theater. And none of those are any room in a typical house. All of the rooms in a typical house are much smaller than any of those spaces, and that's where the big difference comes in. The wavelength of bass sound waves is very long. 20 hertz is like 58 feet long.
Right.
Your room is definitely not 58 feet in every direction, whereas a full-size stadium very well could be. That's not a problem in a stadium. In an anechoic chamber, it's as if the walls aren't there at all.
Sure.
But your house, you definitely don't have 58 feet in every direction from your speaker, and that's what it would take to
Maybe
be...
he does. He has Cerwin Vega speakers. Maybe he does.
Highly unlikely. So, I mean, yes, as long as you have a somewhat normal-sized room, you're into a different territory that has now been researched, and we now know that because these wavelengths are so long, you are never hearing a direct sound wave. You're never hearing a wave that just went from the speaker to your ear at those very low frequencies. It has always gone past your ear and probably bounced back and forth a couple of times, especially between your ceiling and floor, before your ear can even register that the sound is there, because there has to be one full cycle at least. In fact, it takes 2 full cycles for your brain to register that it even happened. That has to happen, and it has bounced between the walls and ceiling and floor of your room multiple times before your ear can even register it. And therefore, the deep bass and the thing producing the deep bass and your room, those are all inseparable. You cannot separate one from the other and say, oh, doesn't it make sense for it to just have that sound come from this one place and come straight to my ear? It never comes straight to your ear. It has always bounced around first. So that's where that advice comes from. It's why we say, even if you have speakers that are capable of playing all the way down to 20 hertz, we still want you to set them to small and cross them over to a pair of properly placed subwoofers. And this does apply in rooms, all right? If you're outdoors, if you're in a stadium, even in a full-size movie theater where you do have some dimensions that might be like 50 feet long, that gets a lot more questionable. But in your house, separate the bass.
Right. He says for critical listening, he prefers to use a great pair of headphones. Those need to play full range, correct? So what makes full range headphones different from full range speakers? Well, because the room is no longer a factor with headphones.
That's right.
Okay? The room is the headphone.
That's right.
The headphone is the room. Yeah. So therefore, you can control those dimensions. The dimensions of your room and your speakers are not built specifically for your room. And even if they were, it would not make a difference because of how the bass, as Rob just explained, how the bass bounces around the room anyways.
And so, honestly, it's still a problem in headphones. Getting accurate bass from headphones is really challenging. Yeah. Because you either have to just absorb the heck out of it, or you have open back headphones where it is slightly uncontrolled, and it's, bass out of headphones rarely sounds the same as bass from a couple of really good subwoofers properly placed in a room. Those two experiences are usually quite different.
Right.
So
I mean, you recognize that there's bass there,
absolutely,
but it never really feels or sounds exactly the same as it does in an open air environment with actual speakers.
But out of necessity, yes, a headphone, if you're going to call it a full range headphone, it does have to produce the bass because there's no option. Like, what else are you going to do? I guess you could have some sort of tactile thing strapped to your chest, but that's just
well, there was that thing, remember?
There was
the vest, and then there was the wrist thing.
The wrist thing,
subwoofer wrist
the wrist
thing
thing never worked, but yes. In headphones, you have no alternative, so they have to play the full frequency range, and it's a challenge. It's a big challenge.
He says, lastly, if you look at the selections of TVs at like Walmart or Target or Costco, there are lots of super cheap 4K TVs available right now, but you can also find used plasma TVs on Craigslist for very low prices. So which is better? Well, it's a good question.
It is.
I mean, it depends on which plasma TVs and then what condition they're in, and that sort of thing. I mean, let's say you found a well-maintained and still performing, very well Pioneer Kuro on Craigslist.
Or one of the later generation Panasonic plasmas.
Sure.
Yes.
If you, or even the Samsung plasmas were really nice too. I like those quite a bit. The older ones that they had.
We're okay.
But let's say you got you had a deal on those. Well, first of all, of course, you're limited to 1080p.
You won't have HDR.
You won't have HDR.
Although the super cheap 4K TVs, even though they might be able to accept an HDR signal, can't actually show it.
I mean, in my mind, a super cheap 4K TV versus a plasma, I would probably opt for the plasma.
Yeah, I mean, your black levels are going to be better. Your contrast is going to be better.
Motion blur is not going to be a problem. Right. Those sorts of things. The kind of things that cheap TVs do poorly, you're not going to have problems with the plasma. What you will get with the 4K TV is 4K resolution, which I do not care about.
Yeah, that really doesn't matter. They could be brighter. A lot of plasmas were not super bright.
Yeah.
And plasmas were susceptible to burning in. If you play games for hours on end on a plasma, you probably will
watch
get
CNN constantly.
Or watch sort of thing, one news channel with its ticker and its logo all the time. So if those are super big concerns, that hasn't changed much. Those are still concerns. But yeah, I mean, as far as black level performance, contrast, absolutely, I would probably opt for the plasma myself over a really cheap. You can get a TCL 6 series, right? That is not super expensive, but I don't think those are the ones he's talking about. I think he's talking about the $400 and $500 ones.
Yeah.
Or if it's 55 inches, maybe even $200 or $300 these days.
I agree. I mean, you're going with the no name, the no brand or whatever it is, bottom of the shelf LCD TV over, versus a used, well maintained plasma. I'll take the plasma.
Yep, agreed.
But it's not that hard to get a really nice LCD 4K these days.
Yeah, well, I mean,
isn't that pricey.
$600 gets you the 55-inch TCL 6 series, and that against a used plasma, that's like I'm starting to lean TCL 6 series in that case, because that's a lot of new features that you're not getting on the plasma.
I agree. Kris uses a free Windows 10 app called Equalizer APO that to apply parametric equalization to his headphones. There's an extension called the PEACE interface.
That's what these things are called, in case people want to look them up.
It's stupid names. I'm sorry. It's a stupid name.
That's PEACE as in peace sign. That's that type of PEACE.
Yeah. That adds some more effects and quick selection presets that are handy for switching between different pairs of headphones. If he were to get a measurement microphone, could he use that same software to equalize full-size speakers? What are our thoughts on using software-based equalization instead of something built into an AVR or a receiver? I mean, that's what what you call it?
The mini DSP?
Mini DSP is, and
it's
Room
an
EQ
external.
Wizard.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, Room EQ Wizard, we're suggesting it all the time. So what are our thoughts on using software-based equalization? I'm for it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to put in the time and the effort, knock yourself out.
I mean,
I don't.
As long as in this case your Windows 10 PC is your source, because this equalizer can only be applied to audio signals that are coming out of your PC. But for a lot of people, that's exactly the case. And yeah, I'm all for it. In fact, very clearly in that Equalizer APO, they recommend pairing it with Room EQ Wizard so that you can equalize your speakers, because you connect the microphone and take the measurements in Room EQ Wizard. Room EQ Wizard can spit out the inverse graphs. So like whatever your frequency response is, it'll spit out the inverse and tell you what your parametric equalizer settings need to be so that you get back to linear, or you can set a different target curve if that's your desire. And then you just plug those into something like Equalizer APO and off you go. There you go. You now have a software-based equalizer. And yeah, like Tom mentioned, it's a similar thing. If you're using a mini DSP, they are having you use Room EQ Wizard to get what the parametric equalizer settings need to be. You can then import those into your mini DSP, and now you have a separate box that sits separate from all of your sources. You can funnel all of your sources through that box and apply equalization that is not the equalizer built into your AV receiver. So yeah, as long as your Windows 10 PC is the source of your sound, knock yourself out, and Room EQ Wizard is free. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, my Chrome has just unfrozen, so I can scroll again. I was like, I'm trying to get to the next question, and I can't get there.
Is everything still recording over on your end?
I don't know.
it would
this looks like it's recording.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Scroll
recording.
bars are still going.
That's recording.
Good stuff.
Okay. Damien says his room is 15 by 21 by 8, so about 2,500 cubic feet. He's got a Yamaha.
Yeah, he didn't say enclosed or not enclosed, so those are the dimensions he gave. At our inclination to assume enclosed, but it might be open. We don't know.
Okay. He's got a Yamaha RXA2040 receiver, Avantage.
Yes.
And a 7 Def Tech or Definitive Technology 8080 series speakers, all of which are bipoles except for the center. The bipole towers have built-in 12-inch subwoofers with dual 12-inch passive radiators and 450-watt amps, and the center has a built-in passive subwoofer driver and dual passive radiators too. Sound Vision measured the -3 dB points, about 35 hertz for the towers and 40 hertz for the center. Now he wants real subwoofers. Thank you. And he's considering dual SVS PC-2000s or dual Power Sound Audio V1811s.
Yeah, those are big.
Those are
ported
wabas.
subs. Those are huge ported subs. So I'm like, I hope you have an open room. If that's what
really,
you
dude. Are you trying to?
I mean, the speakers he has,
damage?
those, Definitive Technology calls those their super towers, and they are big. Yeah. So either he just loves big, loud speakers in a 2,500 cubic foot room, which is decidedly a medium-sized room, or this is an open space. So,
right. For the size of your room, you could probably... but let me finish the question. He says he hasn't heard either of them in person. What are our thoughts? What thoughts can we share and what would we recommend? We recommend you not get such big freaking speakers.
I mean, if this is an enclosed 2,500 cubic feet, that is... they'll work.
It's so far overkill.
But it's so much overkill. Why spend that kind of money? Because that's insanity.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to our last question when we were talking about bass, again, he's got full range speakers that he's been running full range, but now he wants real subs. And now he's going to get to the part of the device that he's not going to like, which is we're going to say cross your towers over, even though they have subwoofers.
So, I mean, here's the interesting thing with those definitive technology towers, because they do have built-in powered subwoofer drivers in those towers.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of things you might be going, okay, should I keep using them as subwoofers and just add 2 more subwoofers, giving me, in effect, 4 subwoofers? And if you did that at the back of your room, so you have your 2 towers up front with their powered subwoofer sections, and 2 more subwoofers at the back of the room, mirroring their placement, as far as uniformity goes, you'd be in really good shape. But
until you got to 35 hertz.
Until you get to lower than 35 hertz, and then your DefTech towers are rolling off while your true subwoofers are not, and you're back to a situation of below 35 hertz, you're essentially got 2 subwoofers just at the back of your room, and that's not great. So in this situation, it's an interesting setup, because we're going to tell you, still keep your 8080 towers plugged in, because they actually cross over at, I think, 500 hertz to that powered 12-inch driver.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff above 80 hertz that the powered 12-inch driver is still responsible for playing. So you still keep them plugged in, but you do not send a subwoofer cable into your towers anymore. You just have one pair of regular speaker wire that feeds those towers. In your AV receiver, you still set the towers to small, and you give them an 80 hertz crossover. So it's an odd setup, because you're like, I have these powered 12-inch drivers, but they have no subwoofer connection, and I'm still setting them to small. It's like, yeah, because they're still playing everything from, 40 to 500 hertz. So you still need them plugged in and powered, but you've got them set to small with a crossover now. So that takes care of that little bit of complication.
But
we are going to rely...
I mean, his room is like
that's just it.
Like,
I mean, his speakers are huge overkill for his size of room already. So maybe he just loves overkill, which, hey, I can dig it. But
I can dig it too. I mean, maybe his thought might be that someday he's going to have a much bigger room.
That's the other thing.
Blah blah blah.
That's right. Or it's a wide open space. We don't know. So.
And we've gotten, somebody got mad at us for recommending building the box, but.
Oh yes,
you should definitely build the box. So we suggest
all the V18. That's an 18-inch driver in a ported cabinet from Power Sound Audio, who's like, we left SVS because they were too small. So
I know. They got mad at us for putting 2 12-inch drivers in a box the size of a small piano.
That's right.
And now we've started our own we've restarted another company just so that we can
make them as big as we please. Yeah.
Oh my God, remember those big old SVS subs. So yeah, I think a series. I honestly think the cylinders.
I mean, PC-2000s. If this is an enclosed 2,500 cubic feet, dual PC-2000s they'd still be technically a bit of overkill, but assuming you like some overkill, that'll satisfy you, and they'll fit a lot better into any room, just placement wise and size. So PC-2000s, if there's an enclosed 2,500 feet, that's our recommendation. I mean, you could go Power Sound Audio. Why not? You could get one of their 15-incher down firing ones. Again,
the smallest ones they make, basically.
The smallest one they make is the down-firing 15-incher.
And you're like, wait a second, I want, I mean, if this is open to the rest of the house, I mean, honestly, dude, do you really want to pressurize I mean, the Power Sound Audios can get pretty close to pressurizing a house, but you really don't want to do that.
Given the towers in the center that he bought, maybe it is. So, yeah, a lot here depends, Damien. If this is a wide open space and you are trying to fill up your entire house, you might not be off the mark. That might be reasonable.
But if you're trying to fill up your entire space, having 2 subwoofers is not necessarily going to make your bass any better.
Right,
because you're not going to be able to place it the way we were just talking about, which is opposing corners or the midpoints of opposing walls, because you have
whole house. Yeah.
You have a whole house, so you got to put one in the home theater and the other one in the kitchen. It doesn't work. So a lot of times what we suggest in these situations is to get one subwoofer that's big, and then place it, as best you can, see how that operates for you, and then if it's not enough or you feel like you want a second one, then go back to the company. And SVS, I don't know about Power Sound Audio, but I know SVS almost always will honor that reduced price for the second one.
They'll give you the $100 off or whatever it is for the second one.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you already bought one? Yeah, here you go. We'll give you
the dual package discount almost always, if it's like within a year or so usually. So. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that covers it. Because enclosed PC-2000s. If it's wide open, then maybe it is. The 3000 series is what used to be the Plus series, And
Yeah.
when we were dealing with like, 8,000 to 10,000 cubic feet, we're like, yeah, that makes sense. So could be.
JR. So since he's exhausted the supplies of AVRant episodes in our iTunes feed, which I think only goes back 20.
Something like that.
JR is going through older episodes from our website. Since he's almost ready to install his in-wall surround speakers and in-ceiling Atmos speakers, his interest was piqued when he heard us talking about backer boxes. Would they be a good idea for his in-walls, in-ceilings, or both? He heard us mention just building your own DIY backer box with about 1 cubic feet of volume. He'd be up for that simple task if we think it'd be a good idea. I mean, it kind of it depends on what speaker you get to. I mean,
yeah, so we know he had the Klipsch ones that are not horn loaded in wall or in ceiling. They're like their basic in wall in ceiling Klipsch brand speakers.
Well, they'll tell you what the Klipsch, it may even be in the manual of the speaker that you bought. It will tell you what the optimal space is having back there. Sometimes they want a whole open. They expect you to have a whole open bay. Sometimes they'll suggest a backer box. I mean, building a backer box is just really not that hard. If you've got everything open, you just essentially, close it in with the 2 2x4s on either side, cut it, and seal it up with some insulation, and you're good to go. But not all in-ceiling or in-wall speakers are built with that design in mind. So you need to check your speaker.
So the Klipsch in-ceilings, they all are. And Klipsch actually sells in-ceiling backer boxes, mainly because they're like, if you're installing it in an attic, you often have fire code requirements where it has to have an enclosure behind it. So I don't know, is it an attic space above your in-ceiling speakers? If it is, you might require having a box. And some places require that box have a certain fire rating, so they're often made out of metal instead of wood or whatever. But that's not a bad thing to just check on, but they do sell them. And the backer boxes for the in-ceiling Klipsch speakers is just shy of 1 cubic foot of air volume. Given that the in-walls that you have are the exact same drivers, I find it difficult to imagine that a 1 cubic foot backer box would damage their sound somehow, given its exact same drivers in the in-ceiling version with a 1 cubic foot or just shy of 1 cubic foot backer box. So the main thing is, if you construct your own boxes, if they're the in-ceilings and they're in the attic, make sure that you're up to the fire safety code, and you do need insulation inside of that backer box. It's not just a hollow box that's going to be ringing around. You fill it full of some insulation or get some of that, Dacron type stuffing from a place like Parks
Cotton
Express.
stuff.
They call it speaker stuffing or speaker box stuffing like that, but it's usually Dacron stuff. You put some of that inside of your backer box and you're good to go.
Carl asks, in some really fancy and super expensive home theaters that get featured by custom integrator sites and magazines, really big projection screens like 250 inches or 300 inches are installed. What kind of projectors are being used with screens that large? Are dual projectors necessary? The one name that comes to my mind whenever I think of those big, or is it Wolf? I think
Could
makes
be
like
Wolf
those
Cinema.
monster thing. I think these things often need an enclosure that's got its own ventilation, and they get super hot. So they have their own, like, obviously I've seen them at shows before. Well, they'll be up on a stand, and they're shooting a screen the size of a movie theater. I mean, it is massive. But they have their own box, and they have like these big, flexible, AC ducting coming out of them and everything else. And it's, I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars on that projector alone.
Yes. So, I mean, for this type of size, which is like, a home cinema, right? This is what the custom installers drool over. In fact, a lot of them, that's all they do are these, $500,000 plus home theater installations. And you're going to see brands like Barco and Christie Digital, Digital Projection, Runco, Sim2, Wolf, like Tom mentioned. So those are the sorts of brands that you're going to be looking at. And honestly, if you look at a 250-inch screen, if you're going for what used to be the standard before HDR came along, which was like 16-foot Lamberts, then you actually only need like 3,000 to 3,500 lumens coming out of there. And I say only because that is the full amount coming out after calibration. And most of what us normal folks would consider a home theater projector, they don't reach that type of level. They might be able to put out 2,500 or 3,000 lumens completely uncalibrated, where they're way too blue and the lamps in high mode and all that crazy stuff. But to have a full calibrated like 3,500 lumens or so, or now getting up into 6,000 to 8,000 if you want to do HDR on these types of sizes, 250 to 300 inches, you might be getting close to 10,000 lumens if you want to do HDR on that. These are getting into, they're often 3-chip DLP. A lot of them are laser phosphor driven now,
Sure.
so that they have the extra light output plus 3 chip plus wider color, because they're getting into all of those things. So I mean, he forwarded one article in particular, which to me absolutely looked like a digital projection brand projector. That they have sort of a characteristic barrel on the end of their lens there, so that looked like a digital projection.
The sim ones always, they have the Ferrari red.
Yeah, they like the Ferrari red on that. So, but it's that type of thing, though. Almost certainly a 3-chip DLP. And yeah, it'll be. I mean, there are some that are like 30,000 lumens, and that's where you're getting to full-size movie theater type screens, 50-foot screen or 30-foot screen type of things. So, yeah, they are absolutely out there. They are not affordable. If you have to ask, it's too much
I remember
for you.
the Sim 2s were like in the $50,000 range when last time I looked at them.
Some of them are.
There's more expensive ones, but that's like their entry level.
And I mean, Sony does have, and Panasonic as well.
Oh, sure.
They have large venue and cinema style ones as well. But usually we're saying like Christie and Digital Projection and Barco, those are very popular right now.
Justin has all of his gear in an equipment rack, and the positioning of his projector means he needs an 80-foot length of cable. He decided running Ethernet made more sense than trying to make HDMI of any kind work over that distance. There are inexpensive HDMI to Ethernet adapters available for mono price, for example, but the inexpensive ones are limited to 10.2 gigabits per second, and some of the installer-centric models are way more expensive at $700 or so. He found a couple of options from Emotiva and HD TV Supply that both claim 18 gigabits per second and HDCP 2.2 compatibility, while having a price that falls in the middle at $350 to $400. But does he really need something that expensive? He'll be getting a 4K projector that can do HDR, so what does he actually need in terms of bandwidth and capabilities in his HDBaseT converter? HDBaseT, for those of you who don't know, is essentially what converts it from HDMI to Ethernet and then back again.
That's right.
So he's a bit confused by the YUV444 and I don't think it's is it YUV?
Sometimes it says that. It's YCC is the other one.
YCC is what I usually see, yeah. And 24, 36, and 48-bit spec stuff. So could we talk him through that and help him find what he should buy? Well, if we knew what projector, first of all,
it's a JVC.
Yeah, let's just say for general, you could look at your projector and say what can it accept, and then only spend that much money.
You're still going to, if you do that, you're going to end up with an 18 gigabit. That's what you're going to want in terms of what it can accept. Yep.
Right. So, but my suggestion is you don't want to spend this money twice. So,
right.
You're going to want to get what you need now. What can be done now, because if you ever decide to go to 8K, you're going to have to do it again. But what you don't want to do is between now and 8K, have to buy something else,
right?
Which is going to be another couple $100 bucks.
8K is going to be a whole other thing. Nothing you can buy right now is going to be future-proof for that. So I wouldn't worry about that. I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm not going to buy this because it's not going to handle 8K. It's like, nothing you can buy right now.
Well, I don't worry about 8K like 4 years from now.
But let's worry about 4K and HDR. So I want to dig into. Well, actually, I'll answer the question right away, because Amazon sells pretty much the exact same HDBaseT extender as what HD TV's Supply sells, but for $100 less. So it's $250 over at Amazon. And that does all the things. The one thing that unit does not do, which the Emotiva does, is the audio return channel. But on a projector, we're not worried about that. You're not going to be sending audio from your JVC projector back to your AV receiver via this thing. So the $400 Emotiva, I don't consider that a bad deal at all, because it gives all the features that those $700 plus ones do, but for $400, including audio return channel. So that's not that common at a $400 price tag. So I think Emotiva is offering a pretty good value there. But yeah, this other one, it is the full 18 gigabits per second. I would definitely advise using a Cat 6 cable, not a Cat 5e. Just that little bit extra bandwidth might help you. They do warn you. They're like, this is good for up to 70 meters, not at the full 18 gigabits. At the full 18 gigabits, it's like good for 40 meters is what they claim, which is still well more than your 80 feet. You should be absolutely fine, but we do have to be aware of these things, because you might be using the full thing. So why might you be using the full thing? So I'll go right back to the signal ultimately is going to end up as red, green, blue, RGB. That's what the signal originates as. It's what it's ultimately going to end up being, is RGB. And for each of those three colors, the red, green, and the blue, you can have these days up to 12 bits for each of those colors. So that's your 36 bits potentially together,
right,
multiplied by whatever your resolution is. So in your case, Ultra HD resolution, 2160p, which is a little over 8 million pixels, multiplied by however many frames per second. That is potentially the signal that's being sent across this thing. So if you I don't have that figure directly off the top of my head, but it's more than 10.2 billion. That's what you end up with. So which is why you need more than the 10.2 gigabits per second. You need the one that can go up to the 18, because the JVC can accept a full RGB 12-bit 60 frames per second 4K resolution signal. So you multiply all those things together, and that's what you might end up with. What is the YUV or YCC444? Well, you can convert RGB into a different signal that they call a color difference signal. What that does is one of the things is the black and white, and then the other two they call color difference channels. So the black and white is you take what are all the parts of the image that are equal parts red, green, and blue. We bunch all of that part of the signal together, and that's our black and white signal. That's the Y. That's the luminance signal. And then you take what is the difference between blue and black and white, and what is the difference between red and black and white, and you send those two things as two other bits of information along with it, and from that you can calculate your way back to the original RGB. So they do that because if you do it at the full YCC 444, that's exactly the same as the original RGB. You saved nothing. You convert it into a slightly different signal. It's no longer separate red, green, and blue. It's now black and white plus difference between red and black and white and difference between blue and black and white, but it's the same amount of data. But you can compress those color difference channels. You lose some information, but our eye is really bad at noticing that. So they sometimes compress it to something called YCC 422, where the black and white, that has all the information, but the other two channels are each half the original resolution. Or you can go down to 420, where the original is the same, but now the two color difference channels are 1/4 of the resolution of the original. But our eye has a tough time picking it up. So you might see YCC 422, you might see YCC 420, and now you've saved some data. Then, of course, you could have it be an 8-bit signal, or a 10-bit signal, or a 12-bit signal, or a 16-bit signal, multiplied by 3, so that's how you end up with the 24, 36, 48-bit stuff. So it's all just a matter of multiplying whatever the signal is for each subpixel times 3 subpixels times however many frames times your resolution, and that tells you how many bits are being sent every single second.
Right. All right.
Does that clear anything up? I hope so. Don't think I got the numbers and technicals, and Tom's eyes glazed over. So, but that's the explanation of why you might need 18 gigabits per second, and your projector can accept that, and your Ultra HD Blu-ray player can send it. So,
there you go.
Let's not skimp.
All right, Richard. Richard's in the UK, and he has an older Onkyo receiver that cannot pass through 4K and HDR. He's using an Epson TW9300, which is the same as the 5040 UB.
That's right. In Europe, they have a different model number, so
yeah,
it's the 5040 UB. That's what we're dealing with.
And he gets most of his content from his Roku streaming stick, which we are assuming must be the Streaming Stick Plus, since he mentions 4K and HDR streaming.
Yeah, because the regular Roku streaming stick, which there is such a thing, that one is HD only. If you want 4K and HDR, it's the Streaming Stick Plus. And he says he's getting that, so I hope that's what it is. Because if it's just a streaming stick, Richard, sorry to tell you, you're not getting 4K and HDR, even though you might be paying for the service from Netflix, say. Yeah, it's got to be a Streaming Stick Plus.
So he'll upgrade his receiver eventually, but he says he can't afford to right now. So he'd like to be able to pass the 4K HDR video directly to his projector while separating the audio to send to his AV receiver. There are lots of HDMI audio extractors listed on Amazon UK. Can we help him identify which is the cheapest that will pass 4K HDR video while letting him separately send 7.1 audio to his receiver? I have no clue.
There's a whole bunch of slightly questionable things here, Richard, that I'm going to dig into a little because... so first of all, sending the 4K HDR video through, that is a little bit of a challenge on some of these. A lot of them will not pass through. A lot of them will say 4K, but there's still the old HDMI 1.4 spec, which technically could pass 4K resolution. That was true, but it couldn't do so at higher than 8-bit. It couldn't do so with HDCP 2.2, which is the copy protection, which is super important. You end up with a blank screen otherwise, or everything down converted to 1080p. So finding ones that do for sure have HDMI 2.0. These days you want HDMI 2.0B because you do have HLG signals, especially over in the UK. They use that quite a bit. So you want HDMI 2.0B, you want HDCP 2.2. So getting that for a super cheap price, and I'm talking, 10 or 15 UK pounds, which is what a lot of these audio extractors say, it's like, nah, not finding that. So you do have to be a bit wary. Now, the other part was he says he wants to still send 7.1 audio. I
don't know that. Does anything do 7.1 audio streaming? I didn't think they did.
Well, that's just it.
Voodoo.
Yeah.
Voodoo, maybe?
Voodoo can.
HDX?
Netflix can if it's an Atmos stream. Right. So that to me is a little questionable because I'm like, are you actually dealing with 7.1? Because this makes a big difference. Because if you are dealing with 7.1 audio, which is it's really rare in streaming. It's pretty much only if it's Atmos. I guess there's some Dolby Digital Plus that could be 7.1 instead of 5.1.
I mean, I can't think of anything.
Most streaming stuff is either 5.1 or it's Atmos.
Right.
But as written, if you want full 7.1 support, that means your audio extractor needs an HDMI audio output. Because you can't send 7.1 over an optical connection, and optical is what you'd be using on most audio extractors.
Right.
So I have two options for you. First one actually does have an independent audio-only HDMI output. So this one is actually a switch. It gives you 4 HDMI 2.0B inputs, full 18 gigabits per second, full HDCP 2.2. It can pass all the things, including Dolby Vision, which is specifically mentioned. Which isn't a thing for your projector, but whatever. We know it'll pass everything through. It's 80 pounds, but it's 4 inputs. It has 2 HDMI outputs, but one of those HDMI outputs is audio only. So that's the device that will for sure do everything you could possibly want to do.
I can't imagine why he would need that, though. Because, I mean, his receiver probably doesn't do Atmos either if it's old enough that it doesn't do the rest of this.
It doesn't do Atmos. So if you're okay with an optical audio connection, we can bring this down to, what is it, 50 pounds? 49.99 pounds? I think that's the other one. It's the same company. There's a both from one, which, what a name. I mean, it's the word color space, but the C has been turned into an X. I don't know. Zuller Space? How do you pronounce that?
I don't know.
What a stupid name for a company. Anyway, that's but they make good products, so...
You just got on me for making fun of stupid names of stuff.
Zuller Space? Come on, what are you? With an X. You just wanted an X in your name. But anyway.
I don't know.
Zuller Space. Yeah, 49.99 UK pounds. That's the one. That one is 3 HDMI inputs, 1 HDMI output, and an optical audio output. So you will have to make sure that all your sources are set to Dolby Digital. That's what you'd want them putting out. And then you'll have 5.1 Dolby Digital as far as the audio goes. That'll be through your optical audio connection, and it will pass through all the video stuff. So,
and again,
I think he was hoping for cheaper, but...
Your receiver will be able to take that 5.1 and turn it into 7.
Sure, it'll upmix it just fine.
That's what it was doing before,
yeah.
Almost certainly. So that's not to worry about.
I'm pretty sure he was hoping for cheaper, but I'm like, I was looking through it, and I'm like, the 15 and 20 pound ones, they don't pass HDCP 2.2.
Yeah.
And none of them had the HDMI audio only jack. I could only find that from this Zuller Space for 80 pounds. So if you really want 7.1, that you would have to get that.
So what settings should you be looking out for in this Roku Streaming Stick Plus, we assume? Each streaming app, Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and Google Play Movies.
Amazon.
Don't use Amazon. And on his projection, make sure he's getting the best picture quality of it possible.
Yes.
I've never used a Roku Streaming Stick, but I mean, I'm like, most of these things, it just sends out whatever it can get.
Yeah, the Rokus are pretty good with their auto settings. I wouldn't be super concerned. If you want to make sure, I mean, resolution, that's easy. You want it at 2160p. You want it at 4K resolution.
Right.
If there's an option to choose between 8, 10, or 12-bit color, I would set it to 10, because that's what all these sources are, and there's no reason to convert that to 12-bit
yeah.
color. None of the streaming sources are sending you 12-bit color. So if there's an option for that, 10. If there's an option to choose either RGB output or YCC output, choose YCC. And if there are different numbers, 444, 422, or 420, choose 422. So if those are options, because I'm not sure in the Roku Streaming Stick Plus, but if those are options you want, YCC color output at 422, 10-bit 4K resolution. That's all the picture settings in your Roku Streaming Stick Plus. Now, Netflix will always give you the best available.
Right.
So they're easy. So you do have to make sure your subscription is for the 4K top tier, because you won't get 4K unless you're subscribed to it. But Netflix is easy. They'll always give you the best available. Amazon forces you, and you can't, so you can't even search for the title that you want and know that the search results will return you the 4K version if a 4K version exists. You have to specifically on Amazon Prime Video search for 4K content. And then you may or may not see the entire list of available 4K content. They are horrible in every conceivable way. Like, they have a separate listing for the exact same title, but a separate listing for the 4K version.
I still can't get over how they won't put the seasons together.
I know.
It drives me absolutely
it's
bonkers that you're like, oh, here's season 3 of Hannibal. Is there a season? Yeah, there is a season 1. Why when I search for Hannibal do I get season 3 and not either of the other 2 seasons?
Yes.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah. So Google Play Movies, as far as I know, it's similar to iTunes where they give you the 2 options, right? Do you want the HD version or do you want the 4K version? You click on the 4K and it plays in 4K. So that one seems fairly simple. So that should be about it. Yeah, his last question is on the projector, so that's that one.
So any tips on calibrating his image? Does he need to buy some sort of special measurement device? Now, Epsons, most projectors these days anyways, but Epsons specifically are very good.
Yes, the color is quite accurate out of the box.
Yeah. You're just going to put it in like cinema mode or whatever it is, or cinema dark. I think they may have that option on there, and going to be pretty good. Now, as far as the 4K content, sometimes there's some differences there, but Rob will tell you about that.
Yeah, so on your Epson, it is the same as the 5040UB. Unfortunately, it will accept a 4K HDR signal. It will not automatically put itself into its HDR picture mode. So when you're watching standard dynamic range content, so again, I'll point you to Chris Heinenen's review over at his website, Reference Home Theater, because he did a good job of describing. The natural picture mode is actually really good for standard dynamic range content. It gets the pictures it gets the colors just right, it gets the gamma settings just right. So the natural picture mode is really good for standard dynamic range. And then so there's 3 different cinema modes. There's a bright cinema mode, which is probably the one you want for HDR, because that keeps the peak luminance as high as it'll go. Then there's the regular cinema mode, and then there's the digital cinema mode, which actually gives you the full P3 color. So if what you care about most is the widest possible color, when you're watching HDR, you might want to use the digital cinema mode, but it actually has the lowest light output. So your choice is bright cinema, which is like 93% of DCI P3. So that's the brightest with not quite as wide color, but it's still 93%. Or digital cinema, where it is the widest color, almost 100% of DCI P3, but it's dimmer. So you kind of have to choose, but you have to manually put it into that picture mode. Chris Heinenen went into how the cinema modes don't perfectly track the HDR gamma, but I question whether you even want them to on a projector, because when they perfectly track the gamma, they tend to look too dim. So you can adjust the gamma in that cinema setting for HDR. I would essentially just do it to taste, because you can decide whether everything looks a bit too dim or a bit too bright, and all you're doing is adjusting the gamma setting. It's not super complicated. Other than that, you don't really have to. I mean, you could bring in a professional calibrator, but it's not really worth it. The colors are already really accurate. Yeah.
All right, Tim. Tim bought a Marantz SR7012 receiver and Emotiva BASAX, a 5175 amplifier, which is going to be 5 channels, 175 watts per channel.
That is exactly what it is.
He wants to power his front, left, right, center with the Emotiva, but when he connected the amp to the receiver and his speakers to the amp, he got the test tones to play out of his front, left, and right speakers, but the center did not produce any test tone. With a center wired directly to the receiver, the test tone played fine. There's something in the settings that he needs to do to get his setup working. What is it? The Marantz? Is there some setting in there that you have to tell it that the center channel, make the center channel active? Because most of the pre-outs are active all the time.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So is there something wrong with the Emotiva? Because that would be my next guess.
I mean, I'm going to be super pedantic here, Tim, because honestly, this should just work. But I will mention, please don't take this in the wrong way. I'm just I'm trying to cover all possible bases because it's super easy to do. The 7.1 analog input is right next to the pre-outs on the back of the SR7012. Yeah. So it would be so easy. You're like, oh, here's a thing that says center, and you plug it in there. It's like, actually, that was the 7.1 analog input. They're right next to each other. So I would not blame anyone for plugging in. So I'm like, that's the super pedantic one. But I will...
it could be even sillier than that. It could be just missed center and plugged in the subwoofer instead.
Exactly.
Well,
that's just it. Yeah, the subwoofer plug is right below the center plug. So if you're looking at the label that says center and you just go down... so it could be as simple as you've literally just plugged in the wrong thing. And believe me, that is not us poking fun or having a laugh or anything. No. Have we not both done that at some point?
I have definitely done it.
Yeah, so
I have definitely done it.
Because honestly, this should just work.
I've admitted on this podcast that I had my speakers wired out, my speaker wired out of phase. So
that's right.
God knows how long.
But I will say, I would recommend on Marantz and Denon their setup assistant is really good. And we were talking last week about how anytime you plug something in or out, you want to make sure you turn the power of the AV receiver off. Well, if you're going through the actual setup assistant, which is like a wizard, it's like a setup wizard.
Yeah.
That you are allowed to leave the thing on the entire time. It's designed that way. It makes sure that it completely shuts off everything during the instruction screen, and only when you click the button that says, okay, I have now connected things, now take me to the next step, does it activate the amplifier. So it is safe to leave the AV receiver on throughout the entire setup assistant process. The instructions are clear, and I would take advantage of that because it will kind of hold your hand and it'll go one speaker at a time and it'll confirm that every speaker is working before you proceed. So I would not hesitate to use that because it does a really good job of checking all the way along, and it will even get you to run Odyssey as part of the setup assistant if you choose to do so. So if you're like, how do I get back to it? Because I've already canceled out of it when I first turned this thing on. You just hit the setup button on your remote, you scroll down to the bottom of the setup menu where it says setup assistant, and you click begin, and it'll go right again as though you're just taken out of the box.
So he turned on Odyssey Dynamic EQ, but it seemed to make his bass quieter. He has dual SVS SB4000 subs, and he likes to feel their tactile output. Is this possible with Dynamic EQ active?
Yeah, this is the opposite result of what usually happens with Dynamic EQ.
With Dynamic EQ, so the idea here is that Dynamic EQ is at reference volume. Your bass should be a certain loudness,
at full reference volume, the volume dial at the 0 dB position, Dynamic EQ is doing nothing. That's full reference volume.
You should hear in relation to the other sounds a certain amount of bass. Now, as you lower the volume, your ability to hear bass changes and generally goes down. Therefore, dynamic EQ normally gooses the bass up a little bit
to keep it
audible. Right. So
for it to seem quieter with it turned on,
seems unusual.
It is a bit.
to say the least. Now, my question is, did you just turn on Dynamic EQ or did you turn on Odyssey?
That's right.
Because a lot of times when you have dual subwoofers and Odyssey is active, Odyssey will, just in general, it seems like the bass is less because you're having more even response across your seats.
That is also true.
Which means where there was, humps in your frequency response and you're like, oh, I can totally notice the bassy here. Oh, feel how bassy it is. It wasn't supposed to be, and now it's not. And then when the big stuff kicks in, that's when you're like, oh my goodness, where'd all this bass come from? So if that's what you're noticing, then it's normal and don't worry about it.
Yeah.
But if it's something else, if it's literally the bass across all the frequencies, even when when you get the big explosion at the beginning of whatever action set piece movie you're watching, if the bass is still lower, then something's wrong.
And it could be another Odyssey technology, which easily gets turned on during the Odyssey setup process, which is Odyssey Low Frequency Containment, Odyssey LFC.
And this setting is supposed to make it so that you're no longer, the bass is not going to bother your neighbors as much, which means...
All it does is make it quieter, though.
That's
we've
literally
seen
the
the
only way you can do it.
We've seen that's all it does is it rolls it off.
You cannot. Bass is not like a puppy. You can't tell it not to go in the other room. Right. It's gonna go. So you have to just turn it off,
so
and that's what it does.
In that one, you press the setup button into your main menus, go into the audio section. So this is tricky because you go into the audio section and then the Odyssey section within the audio section, and that's where you can turn off Odyssey low frequency containment, in addition to turning on and off dynamic volume and dynamic EQ. All three of those things are separate, but they all kind of get turned on by default.
So EQ on, volume off, LFC off.
That's right. Because that really sounds like LFC is just on. That's
what it sounds like to me too. But it could be the other one as well.
But again, because the reason I say it's a bit tricky is because there's another Odyssey menu section. So you have to specifically be in the Odyssey section that is within the audio menu of the Marantz, just to mention that. But this is another reason to maybe just go through that whole setup assistant again, because like I said, it kind of walks you through step by step, and that way you can make sure you got the exact settings you want.
All right, Damien. Is this the same Damien? Or
There's a different Damien. One was Damien C. This is Damien D.
All right, Damien D. This comes from Twitter. Realistically, Damien says he has about $1,500 to put towards a new TV. He'd like a 65-inch OLED, but that doesn't seem to be within reach right now, and probably not for the foreseeable future. For
prices are only going to come down. The new factories coming online from LG.
Yeah.
It's going to get cheaper. So.
He was eyeing the Vizio P Quantum, which was down to $1,500 on Black Friday, but everywhere was out of stock, and now the price is back up to $2,100. Yep. The Sony Z9D is now on clearance, and it's dropped to $2,000, but that's still over budget, and he isn't convinced he's going to be fully satisfied with the Vizio P series.
That's the regular Vizio P series, not the Quantum.
Okay.
Yeah.
He sits about 9 feet away, so he's thinking that 65 inches would be a nice size, but now he's pondering going down to a 55-inch so they can afford an OLED. Or maybe he should consider buying a Sony or Samsung LCD. What do we think he should do?
55 inches from 9 feet. That's
not
small.
big enough.
That's getting small.
I actually don't like 65 inches from 9 feet, but that's just me.
I mean, I could go with 100 inches at 9 feet because that's like 46-degree field of view. So.
Yeah, I mean, I sit about 6 to 8 feet away from mine and my 90-inch screen, and I'm like, this is perfect.
This is fine, yes,
yeah. 55 inches, I don't think you're going to be happy with. Now, you're in kind of a conundrum here because you're price limited to $1,500, and 65 inches is a very large size TV for that price point if you're not going budget.
Right.
And you want something high end. I'm telling you, dude. Now you're not going to love this suggestion, but $1,500 you can get. I mean, you won't get 4K. But you can get a projector and a screen.
Oh, I see. Okay.
That will be much bigger than this.
If size is the thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. If size is what you're mostly worried about. But it sounds like to me like he's mostly worried about quality.
Yes.
Of the image. And he wants the HDR and the Dolby Vision and all that stuff.
Perfect black levels. Yeah.
Well, you're just going to have to save your money. I hate to say it. I don't really see any other option. Look for deals, but just keep saving your money until you get enough for the OLED. Because
it really is, yeah. Because honestly, the way things have panned out at the end of the year here, I'm like, if a Vizio P series, not the Quantum, but the Vizio P series, which I think is $1,200 regularly, it got down to like just over $1,000 on Black Friday, but $1,200 is what the 65-incher goes for, which clearly would be within his budget.
Right.
But I'm like, if the Vizio P series is not good enough for you, and I'm not telling anybody that it shouldn't be, I'm just like, for some people, it's not going to be fully satisfying. And if it isn't, then I see no reason to spend the $1,500 or $1,600 that would get you like a Sony X900F or a Samsung Q6, because while those might be a little bit better in some areas, like the Sony's a little bit better in not showing color banding, right? And it's a little bit smoother in its motion. But everything else, the Vizio P series is just as good for less money. On the Q6 from Samsung, which is like, $1,500-$1,600 price range, it's edge lit, and its contrast isn't even as good as the Vizio P series. So I'm like, it's Vizio P series or it's OLED/high-end LCD, which I would put the Quantum into that high-end segment. That's like right up there with a Samsung Q8 or Q9. But those aren't any less expensive than an OLED.
Which he's got to do. I think that his best bet is to wait for the Quantum
to come back
to get another
it will
a new model.
For Super Bowl, it'll be down to $1,500 again for Super Bowl.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
Yeah.
So I would either, if $1,500 is where you max out, I would wait for the Quantum to come back to that sale price, or I would save up and get an OLED, or, I mean, have a good look at a Vizio P series, because if that's good enough for you, there's no reason to spend between that and an OLED. The ones that fall in between, I'm like, unless you really care about the motion and the color banding, and X900F from Sony is worth it to you, and you're willing to live with the horrible Android TV interface. It's terrible on that model. Yeah, Vizio P otherwise.
Yeah. All right, Biv on Facebook. Biv asks, how did Rob end up deciding to get Ascend Sierra 2 speakers? Was it an audition, an A-B comparison, just blind faith in Ascend and RAL ribbons? You had the Sierra 2s before you had the RAL. You got the upgrade later.
No, it was the opposite way around. Well, yeah, so I had Sierra 1 NRTs before I got the upgrade kits to turn them into Sierra 2s.
Right.
Yeah,
so how did you end up with the speakers to begin with?
Yeah, so I heard some Sulk speakers that used the RAL ribbon tweeters. Because I was looking for my forever speakers at the time, and I was almost ready to pull the trigger on some Focal Electra BE speakers.
The Beryllium tweeters.
Beryllium tweeters, which are really nice speakers, but expensive. And so I was like,
quite pricey.
One of the reasons was they have a center in that series that can actually be converted to like an on-wall or a very skinny type of thing. And I needed something with a shallow depth from front to back. I just don't have the space for a big thick center speakers. So that was one of the reasons I was looking at. I was like, well, Sulk does custom all the time. So I heard some of, I mean, these were upper end Sulk speakers that use the RAL ribbon tweeters. I'm like, that's a really nice tweeter. And so then I found out that Ascend was using those RAL ribbon tweeters, and I already liked Ascend a lot from their SE series speakers. But I'm like, can they make a center that will fit the dimensions I need? So I emailed Dave, and he's like, yeah, we can do custom stuff. I'm like, oh, there you go. And they were like half the price of the Focals or the Sulks. So that's how I ended up with Ascend in the first place. Now, at the time, the Sierra 2s didn't exist. So I got Sierra 1 NRT bookshelf speakers for my surrounds and height channel. At the time, it was DTS Neo X. So I had front heights and front wides. I still have front wides. Yeah, and
you and you.
And then they're like, okay, Sierra 2s, they use the same cabinets as the Sierra 1s, but now they have RAL ribbon tweeters as well. So I'm like, okay, let's upgrade them all. And then I had my front heights upgraded. I was like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. That made no difference. But nonetheless, there they are. So that's how I ended up where I am, Biv.
Josh asks, what should you use to clean an OLED screen or OLED screen? It's plastic, right? So I mean, there's cleaners that you can get for your laptops and all that other stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wear eyeglasses, so I use eyeglass lens cleaner if I need anything at all. Usually I just use a nice high quality microfiber cloth.
Yeah.
Don't get the like absolute cheapest bottom of the barrel microfiber cloth, because sometimes those leave little fibers behind that you can't get off no matter what you do. I hate those stupid things. But a nice quality microfiber cloth usually is everything. If there's some kind of smudge that you need, I just use a lens cleaner, eyeglass lens cleaner, which I spray onto the microfiber cloth, not onto the screen.
Right. Most of the TV manuals will tell you what you can use to clean them. And
they usually say dry cloth. So.
Dry cloth, or damp cloth or something like that. But I mean, that's basically.
But yeah, I mean, lens cleaner, if it's not going to scratch eyeglasses, it's not going to scratch an OLED screen. So
that's right.
That's the stuff.
All right, Boschko. Boschko has been using Amazon Basics brand subwoofer cables. He's noticed that it's spec'd as copper clad. Would pure copper subwoofer cable make an audible difference? Should he buy one? No and no.
No. Copper clad aluminum is totally fine for, I mean, it's fine for anything we're using. It's totally fine. No reason to spend more on a subwoofer cable at all.
In fact, the only reason that you would spend more on a cable was is if you bought into that whole idea that cables make a difference. Then your cables would actually make a difference because they're poor. They have some sort of weird design.
They're attenuating the signal somehow, which they shouldn't actually be doing.
Then you're like, oh, these make my speakers sound different.
I mean, I guess
these cables must be better.
If you're living right next to a broadcast tower and you're just bathed in EMI interference or something, maybe.
Whatever.
Or they're 300 feet long.
Right,
I don't think they're 300 feet long.
How many dedicated electrical circuits do we, Tom and Rob, have for our home theaters? What amperage? Don't know. I mean, I've got one that everything's plugged into, but that's about it. I mean, there may be stuff that some outlets that my subwoofers are plugged into that are on different circuits, but I'm not aware of it. So I have no idea. A normal 12, I suppose, 15. I don't know.
20? I'm sure it's a 15 amp circuit. Yep.
whatever it is. I've got the normal one.
Standard household. Yeah. I bought an apartment. I didn't have anything custom done or rewired. And according to the electrical panel, I have one outlet for my den. And my den is my home theater, or one circuit for my den.
Yeah.
My den is my home theater. So all of the outlets in my den are on one 15-amp circuit.
There you go. Boschko has one 15-amp circuit that is powering his entire equipment rack, and then a second 15-amp line that powers pretty much everything else in the room, including his 2 subs. Audioholics talked about having dedicated circuits and maybe even using a 20-amp circuit, so he thought this was really important. But when he looks at his APC power conditioner, it never says it's using more than 30% of the outlet's capacity, even when all of his equipment is powered and running. His receiver alone is rated at 900 watts. So how is his electrical usage seemingly so low? And if all of his gear only uses 30% of that one outlet's capacity, could he have plugged his 2 subwoofers into that same outlet too and still been fine? If so, why the recommendation of having dedicated circuits? I'll be honest with you, I've never really totally understood why we have to have dedicated circuits. Most of the time,
well, usually it's for dimmers or anything with a motor, you know.
Yeah. So if you've got dimming things, you can sometimes hear noise as things are dimming, or a motor turns on. It's kind of like when you run your vacuum cleaner, and your TV used to get staticky back in the day.
Quite a few people with our theaters, we have motorized recliners, right?
Sure.
So that's got a motor.
I have motorized recliner, and it's plugged into the same thing as everything else, and I don't have any problems. But most of the time I've seen people worried about how, like, especially when they start talking about 20-amp circuits, they're talking about massive monoblock amps that they're using to power some ridiculous speaker, or just massive monoblock amps that they're using to power regular old speakers that they totally don't need those massive monoblock
amps. I mean, you get those ATI amps, or even the monoprice monoliths. The inlet is a 20-amp inlet. They give you a 15-amp plug, so it'll clearly still run on a 15-amp circuit, but you can optionally get a 20-amp plug and plug it into it. It's capable of running off of that.
And I mean, your question, why is it only using 30% when he's got a 900-watt amplifier, blah, 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 blah. Well, I mean, what those numbers are for, mostly, first of all, those numbers are seriously hyped up. Let's start with that. But this is not continuous power.
That is the maximum possible.
Yeah, and it's instantaneous, and usually for a millisecond. It's very, very little, very rare that you're going to use anywhere close to that, especially not sustained.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, you want to think that power is drawn, not pushed.
Right.
So you have this well of power. This isn't really right. What you're creating is a difference in potential on either side, and it moves back and forth. That's what's really going on. So on one side, it's like an absence of electrons. So the electrons want homeostasis. They want to be even on both sides of the circuit. So you create an absence of electrons on one side, and they all rush over there. And then you create an absence of electrons on the other side, and they all rush back. That's what's really going on in the circuit, going back and forth. But you can sort of think of it as, the power is being drawn to that other side. It's not being pushed by the side that has an excess of electrons. So your wall outlet has this big pool, this big excess of electrons that are all waiting there. And when they see an absence of electrons on the other side of a circuit, they go, oh, let's go over there. Let's try to make things even. But it's not as though this 1,800 watts of potential electrons is like, oh, we're just going to push our way into the circuit. So the 900 watts is like the maximum that could possibly run through there, but you're probably only using like 2 or 3 watts at the most per speaker, which is why it's like, 30% of that 1,800, potential watts that is theoretically possible from your wall outlet, we only need 600 of that at the most. Could he have plugged his subwoofers in? Yeah, absolutely, man. your subwoofers are probably drawing like 5 watts at the most.
We got to remember, there's all these capacitors within your amplifiers too, and they're all sitting there with essentially powered batteries waiting to have power drawn from them. So as they empty, and that's where all that 900 watts is coming from, they can all empty all at the same time and give you all this power. Well, then they fill right back up from the wall, and it's,
Well, I mean, that was the other thing, was like, before we had soft start circuits and stuff like that, if you had multiple amplifiers that didn't have a soft start, they would try to charge those capacitors all at exactly the same time as they all turn on, and that could trip a breaker. because
Right.
that was like, give me the, I mean, some of these are like 1500 or 1700 watt amplifiers, right? And they're like, give me all of that right now when there's 5 of us. Right? It's like once they're all powered up one after another and given time to charge up and that, they're fine. They're distributing like 10 watts most of the time. Yeah. But on that first initial startup, it was possible to trip breakers. So some of the advice of dedicated circuits came from that old school type of thing too, when there's like class A amplifiers only. We got to burn off half of these watts as heat because that's what we do.
Yeah, my house in Jacksonville was that way. If you ran the microwave and the toaster oven, the circuit would break. It would trip. And I ended up having to get a 20 amp circuit put in. And the guy looked at the wire and went, "Yeah, I'll take it." I'm like, "I just paid you $100. You've been here for 2 minutes." He's like, "Yeah, it's fine."
That'll take it. Nice.
Well, I mean, he just looked at the gauge of the wire. And he was like, "Oh, yeah."
14?
Yeah. I think it was 12, actually.
Well, if it's 12, then you are fine.
Yes. David. Somehow, none of David's stereo equipment has a headphone jack, so could he connect a stereo RCA 3.5mm cable to the red and white outputs of a CD player or preamp and use that to power a pair of headphones?
Not very well.
Not very, yeah. The CD player in particular is not going to work. You're going to get a single volume, right?
Well, he mentioned that his does have a variable volume output selector.
Oh, does it?
Wow. So.
Okay. Is it a boombox?
No,
it can't be.
I mean, it's just a variable preamp output, but it's still a weak signal.
Yeah. The voltage coming out of those is not nowhere near what you need to drive.
We're into the single milliwatt type of range, which you, on some like not difficult to drive headphones, you would get some sound. I'm not saying that, but it's I mean, there is a reason why there is a headphone amplifier in anything. The line level signal coming out of a preamp or out of a CD player, it's still too low. It needs to be amplified even for pretty much any pair of headphones. So I want to get a nice inexpensive headphone amp of some kind. Actually, the guys over at AVXL, they were just mentioning that JDS Labs, who does a lot of headphone amps, they have a nice like under $100 unit that they're putting out now, which they have a similar thing to me, which is like most of these headphone amps were really upset because they don't have the really low noise floor. They all hiss, even the expensive ones. They're like this, like it's like $95 or something from JDS Labs. They're like, it's super quiet. Its signal to noise ratio is like 128 decibels to 0, you know? So it's, that could be something to look into.
Yeah, for just a couple dollars more, though, you can buy a new AV receiver for accessories for less that'll have a headphone jack on it.
That's true.
So there you go.
That's true.
McMansion Kris. Kris has been using his dual SVS PC-12 Plus subwoofer cylinder subs in his 10,000 plus cubic feet of air for a while now. They've never sounded bad, but they've never shaken his whole house, which he always was figured just due to the huge volume of air they're trying to pressurize. But he recently changed a setting in his receiver, the Marantz 7010, that made a huge difference and seemingly woke up his subs. All he did was go into the audio settings menu and turn on the subwoofer level adjust. He did not touch anything else and did not increase the subwoofer level adjust setting. He just left it at the default 0 dB with this plus or minus 12 dB range. By default, subwoofer level adjust is turned off, so simply turning it on made a huge increase in his bass output. Now his kids are asking why their butts are vibrating during movies. In fact, now the bass seems a bit boomy. He wants to keep his this huge tactile and output improvement, but eliminate any boominess, and he's worried that rerunning Odyssey will somehow set everything back the way it was. What was going on? It turned the bass up. I mean, it's basically I don't know how this thing works,
right,
or what you did, but it essentially just turned the bass up. How can you get the tactile without the boominess? You can't. You can shake you get butt kickers from your couch. Well, that's what I'm saying. You can't have both. It's either going to be too much bass, which is what the boominess is, that will shake. Because I mean, these things that can often be like resonances in your house. Like the structure of your house is now beginning to resonate because you've reached that kind of sound pressure level, and that's where the boominess is coming from. Yeah. I mean, butt kickers for the couch, you can get the tactile. And then, but I mean, it's what we've always said, is that you really don't want to pressurize the entire space because it
starts getting nutty.
It gets crazy.
So why did this happen? Well, so this is one of those weird things. Again, you've got the speaker setup menu in the Marantz's. You also have the separate audio menu. And in the audio menu subsection, there are two things. One is dialogue level adjust and one is subwoofer level adjust. The dialogue level adjust is just the trim level for your center speaker, and the subwoofer level adjust is just the trim level for your subwoofer. But when you turn those on, they override what the trim levels were set by Odyssey. So if you go back and you look at what the trim levels are in your speaker setup menu, they'll still be wherever you set them during the Odyssey setup or where you manually set them. But when you turn on dialogue level adjust or subwoofer level adjust, it now overrides that trim level. So I imagine the only explanation is that if you went into your subwoofer trim level, the regular speaker manual setup, that must be a negative number.
Yeah,
if it isn't, I'm super confused. But I don't think... Yeah, I bet you it's set -4 or -6 or something like that,
right,
which would be totally normal. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
Now that you click subwoofer level adjust on and it goes back to 0, it has overridden that. It's as though you bumped the trim level of your subwoofer output up to the 0 range instead of wherever it is right now, which I assume is a negative number. So that's the explanation of why it happened. And it's as simple as, I mean, so what could you do? I mean, you could, if you rerun Odyssey again, you could set the volume, the physical volume dials on the backs of your subs lower so that you do not get a negative trim number.
Why would you go through this when you could just turn that stupid thing off and then be done with it?
Well, because he's like, I enjoyed what happened, but not the boominess. Well, yeah, like Tom said, you can't really separate.
You can't get they're together. No,
Yeah.
you're going to end up, if you rerun, basically look at what Odyssey set your trim level of and take your, whatever this thing is you turned on and set it to the same thing. And you're going to notice that it sounds exactly the same as you did before.
Yeah.
That's all. That's basically what it is.
Yep.
So, you know, what you can do when you want to have this extra bass at those times is just go into your subwoofer trim level and bump it up.
That's true.
You know, and just remember what the old setting was.
Or you can use this subwoofer level adjust and flick it on and off. And I mean, you could go to the subwoofer level adjust, put it to like -1 or -2. Maybe that's just enough to get rid of the boom while still being louder than where it was set during Odyssey. And then you just turn off subwoofer level adjust, which reverts back to the original trim level when you want the most accurate linear response.
Yeah. Last but not least, we've got Infinite Gary. Gary noticed that the manual for self-powered speakers mentions that they can accept wireless signals, but still to use a wire for best sound quality. With wireless only growing in popularity, will it ever sound just as good as using a physical wire?
It already can.
Well, it already, I mean, basically, you can get CD quality sound out of wireless.
Bluetooth you can get higher than that if it's Wi-Fi.
So, you know, why are they going to say that? They're going to say that because just a CYA. That's just a CYA. They're just trying to cover their behinds in case you've got something set wrong, or you have a problem with your wireless or whatever. It's just a guarantee.
Also, I mean, not all self-powered speakers have
the ability
aptX from Bluetooth. Like if Bluetooth is the only wireless signal it accepts and it doesn't accept aptX, then that is lossy. So.
Right.
You know, they're not lying to you if they say the best sound quality is still with a wire because the only wireless signal we accept is lossy Bluetooth. So that would be a fair enough statement if that's the case. Yeah. But yeah, like speakers that can go over Wi-Fi, that can be higher than CD quality. But yeah, I mean, you know, as far as technically what's going into them, yeah, it can be 192 kilohertz, 24-bit. You can send that over Wi-Fi just fine. You can send regular full CD quality over aptX via Bluetooth. So they can already sound that good. Usually the issue there, and like people are still like, why can't my surrounds just be wireless? Why isn't it super easy? Well, latency. Latency is a little bit of the problem. There's still latency in the wireless signal. It's why WISA, the Wireless Speaker Alliance, it's taken them so long. It's growing now. It's starting to get on a bit of a roll. But their whole thing was we wanted a wireless signal that had exceeded like such low latency as to not be important, right? Like 1 or 2 milliseconds that you didn't have to worry about that at all. That you could just use it as though it were a wire. Whereas with Bluetooth or with Wi-Fi, you're into enough latency that you could actually notice that, you know, it's not fully synchronized.
What's her name had that problem with her surround back speakers, right?
Abby?
Abby.
Yeah.
And that was her big deal. Her big deal was latency, trying to get that whole thing synced up. And we helped her with
volume levels, too, which, you know, just you have 3 different places you can adjust the volume level. You have what's coming out of the preamp, what the transmitter is sending, and the gain on the amplifier side on the wireless amplifiers. There's 3 places to adjust the volume. Yeah, it's not like plug and play, which is what people want, right? They're like, why can't I just plug in a pair of surround speakers and it all connects wirelessly and all just works? So those are the complications. But as far as the quality of the signal being sent, it can be entirely the same as.
Well, I mean, we can send. I mean, when HDMI came out, there was wireless HDMI solutions.
Yes. Yeah.
that were 1080p.
Yep.
So you can't tell me that we can't do CD quality audio or higher over wireless. We can, just because whatever speaker it is doesn't accept it, or they are always going to say plug in a wire, because that guarantees you getting whatever the signal is.
That's right. Yeah.
So that they're always going to say that. That's just a CYA thing.
But yeah, no, but fair enough. If it's Bluetooth, if that was the thing, then they're not lying to you. That is a lossy signal. So yeah.
Right. All right, that's it for this week and for this year.
It is.
Everybody have a good holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that stuff. We will see you after. I will see you after the new year, and you will be listening to Rob and Lee patter on about.
Oh yes, we did.
VHS.
Yes, we did.
So, we want to thank our 78 or 79 patrons over at Patreon.com. Damien, Justin, and Richard included. Thank you, all of you, for supporting the podcast, and we look forward to continued podcast next year.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks so much to our 79 at the moment. Is that still true? Is it still 79 as we speak right this moment? Come on, number. Oh, there it is. It's still 79 right now. And thank you, Damien C, Justin B, and Richard P for being some of our patrons. Also want to mention, if you do come to just avrant.com, our website, over on the right-hand side, there is a support the podcast button. There's our Patreon link over there, and also a support the podcast button that'll just take you over to PayPal if you'd like to do a one-time donation via PayPal.
Also, thank Greg for talking us up to AV Science, Dave for the recommendation for a garlic press for me, and James for Rob's gift card. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, James, thanks so much for that Christmas present. I love that. Dave, I hope that garlic press works out. I'm excited to hear Tom's review in the new year.
That's even if she got it. I don't know what she got.
Yeah, who knows? Might have to order it from Switzerland. You never know.
Who knows?
And Greg, thanks for talking us up to AV Science.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Mantry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AV Rant.
Now go out and listen to something.